A quiet man in faded jeans was told to move. The crew never checked his name. The man in 1A laughed. And within minutes, $500 million, 0 cents vanished from the stock market. And what happened next brought an entire airline to its knees. Before we dive in, drop a comment below. Where are you watching from? And what would you have done if you were him? The terminal at JFK International Airport hummed with its usual polished chaos. Heels ticking like metronomes, overpriced espresso swirling in sleek paper cups, and flight announcements echoing from the high glass ceilings. Among the swirl of luxury luggage and tailored suits, no one gave the man in the dark gray jacket a second look, and that was exactly how he liked it. Keanu Reeves moved with quiet certainty, his steps unhurried, his posture relaxed. A scuffed leather satchel was slung over his shoulder. His clothes, though clean and simple, black jeans, weathered boots, a faded navy t-shirt under a canvas jacket, set him apart in a crowd used to bespoke blazers and cashmere travel wraps. But there was something else about him. A stillness, a gravity that didn't ask for attention, but seemed to bend the space around him. He held a first-class boarding pass. Atlantic Air Flight 447 to Zurich. Seat 1A, printed under the name K. Charles. No frills, no status flaunted, just a man traveling alone. The gate agent didn't bother making eye contact as she scanned the pass. First class, all the way up, she muttered without a smile. Keanu nodded politely and stepped onto the jet bridge, disappearing into the quiet opulence of Atlantic Air's flagship international cabin. The interior glowed in warm amber tones, polished wood panels reflecting the soft lighting like the inside of a private club. Leather seats that reclined into beds, glass partitions, gourmet menus already tucked into the seat backs. It was luxury, tailored for the elite. But as Keanu reached 1A, he stopped. Someone was already there. A man, mid-50s, pale, with sharp features and a salt and pepper haircut. He sat sprawled in the seat like it was designed for him, one leg crossed over the other, a flute of champagne in hand, scrolling through emails with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. Keanu glanced at his boarding pass again, then turned toward a tall, blonde flight attendant adjusting glasses of rosé on a tray. Her name tag read, Natalie. "Excuse me," Keanu said, calm and low. "I believe that's my seat." Natalie looked him over, briefly, surgically, and offered a practiced smile that stopped short of warmth. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to step aside just for a moment. We've had a last-minute seating adjustment. That seat has been reassigned." She hadn't asked for his name, hadn't checked his ticket, just delivered a polite, polished brush-off. Keanu didn't argue, he didn't frown, he simply tilted his head. "I wasn't informed of any change," he said evenly. "That's my assigned seat, paid for, confirmed." Natalie lowered her voice as if doing him a favor. "We had a priority request from one of our Platinum Legacy clients. We're asking for your cooperation." She gestured toward business class. "Row 17. Still nice, but not where he belonged." Keanu looked at her, then back at the man lounging in 1A. The man didn't even glance up, and in that moment, Keanu understood exactly what this was. But he said nothing. Not yet. Business class was quieter than economy, but it still wasn't first, not in the way that mattered. Keanu settled into seat 17C without a word. Around him, other passengers shifted and arranged themselves with the practiced ease of frequent flyers. Silk scarves, silver cufflinks, brushed wool. They stole sideways glances at him, then looked away just as quickly. He could feel the invisible lines forming, lines he had walked through all his life. Today, they pressed harder. He adjusted his satchel beneath the seat and leaned back. The flight hadn't even taken off, but the altitude of judgment was already suffocating. 2 rows ahead, a woman in her early 40s leaned toward her husband and whispered something. Her voice was low, but not low enough. Maybe he used points. They've gotten lax with upgrades lately. Her husband didn't bother to whisper. Or maybe he won a contest, he muttered, eyes never leaving his tablet. Looks like one of those down-on-their-luck indie types. Probably writes poetry in Brooklyn. Keanu smiled slightly, an expression that didn't reach his eyes. He'd heard worse. He'd lived worse. But this wasn't about him anymore. This was about what still passed for normal at 38,000 feet. As the rest of the passengers boarded, the first-class curtain remained open just long enough for him to catch a glimpse of Natalie leaning toward the man in 1A. Martin Langford. Keanu recognized the name now. An investor known more for his headlines than his portfolio. Langford once claimed on a live panel that equality is great for marketing, but disastrous for margins. That was 2 years ago. No apology ever followed. Now here he was, being handed a throne that wasn't his, while the man who paid for it sat 20 rows behind, offered silence in exchange for peace. Keanu looked down at his phone. One unread notification glowed at the bottom of the screen. Protocol ready. He tapped the icon. A dark screen loaded. A simple prompt blinked at him. Initiate Clause 7C, reason, operational ethics breach. His thumb hovered over the screen. Then he pressed confirm. No sound, no spotlight, just a silent command. No one around him noticed, not the couple still discussing his shoes, not the man reading The Economist, not even the boy across the aisle. Until he looked up. The boy, maybe 8 or 9, wore a soft hoodie and clutched a stuffed animal. His mother, a black woman in a neat blue sweater, sat beside him, her back straight but her eyes tired. The boy stared at Keanu like he was trying to place a face he'd seen in a movie once. Then he leaned toward his mom and whispered, "Is that Neo?" The mother glanced over and offered a polite, uncertain smile. Keanu met her gaze and nodded. Just slight. A moment later, the curtain closed, and first class disappeared from view. But the shift had already begun. Not in the cabin, in the system. The cabin settled into its polished rhythm. Champagne corks popped in first class, while the hum of safety announcements buzzed overhead in the back. But beneath the surface, the tension hadn't gone away. It had merely changed compartments. From seat 17C, Keanu sat still, eyes lowered to the in-flight magazine he wasn't reading. He could feel the weight of stares. Not the loud, obvious kind, but the ones that lingered a moment too long before darting away. The kind of stares that judged without speaking, condemned without trial. The mother beside him shifted slightly, her posture stiffening as a flight attendant passed her by for the second time without offering a blanket or even a smile. She glanced at Keanu and offered a look that said, "It's not just you." Across the aisle, the child whispered again, louder this time. "That is Neo, I'm sure." "She," the mother replied gently. "Let people have their peace, baby." "I don't get it," he said. "Why did they make him move?" Keanu didn't answer, but the words hung in the air. Honest, innocent, too real. Minutes passed. Then came the smallest sound, an alert tone from somewhere deep in the aircraft systems, barely noticeable. But in the flight manager's galley station, a notification pulsed red on a secured screen. Bryce Harmon, the onboard flight operations man, stared at the message in disbelief. Incoming, Clause 7C, priority flagged. Initiated by verified authority/K. Charles, do not override. He blinked, then blinked again. Clause 7C? That's an ownership level breach flag. He checked the flight manifest. Row 17C, K. Charles. His eyes widened. Back in first class, Martin Langford poured himself a second glass of champagne. "You'd think these people would know their place," he muttered, to no one in particular. The woman next to him, a sleek executive type, offered only a tight smile and sipped her wine. Langford grinned. "Luxury's getting crowded, don't you think? Feels like flying a private jet with economy strapped to the back." A few passengers chuckled under their breath. The rest stared forward, pretending they hadn't heard. In row 3, a man in a suit looked up from his laptop and murmured to his wife, "Wasn't that guy in first class before?" "He must have been upgraded by mistake," she whispered. "Doesn't look like he belongs here." No one questioned the assumption. No one defended him. Not one voice challenged the narrative. But somewhere, between silence and complicity, the atmosphere shifted. And so did the system. In Zurich, phones began to vibrate. At Atlantic Air's corporate HQ in Manhattan, a legal advisor looked at her screen, frowned, and said out loud, "What the hell is Class 7C doing active mid-flight?" But the man who triggered it was still seated quietly in 17C, legs crossed, notebook open. He wasn't taking notes. He was keeping score. And when the reckoning came, no one on that plane would be able to say they didn't see it coming. Because they did. They just chose to stay quiet. If you're still here. Comment 8 to let us know you're watching. The curtain dividing first class from the rest of the plane swayed slightly as a breeze of movement passed through the aisle. Flight 447 had leveled out at 38,000 feet. Outside, the Atlantic Ocean stretched endlessly below. Inside, silence reigned. Controlled, curated, expensive. But in seat 17C, Keanu Reeves sat like a stone at the center of a storm no one else could see. His notebook lay open, its pages filled with rows of numbers, initials, and phrases like optics override, Langford, flagged, and internal bias correlation. But the pen in his hand had stopped. His fingers hovered over a different device now, a slim black phone with no brand name, just a glowing interface and a biometric thumb pad at its center. He placed his thumb down. The screen blinked once. Authentication verified. Welcome, K. Charles. Volta Systems Live. Then it prompted, Trigger Clause 7C, Operational Ethics Breach Target, Atlantic Air 447/real-time, activation warning, irreversible. Keanu stared at it for a beat. He thought of Natalie's voice. Sweet, but surgical, telling him to move without ever checking his name. He thought of Martin Langford, sipping champagne and making offhand comments that echoed centuries of entitlement. He thought of the child beside him asking why no one said anything. And then he pressed confirm. The phone screen went dark. No sound. No announcement. No attention drawn. But on the other side of the aircraft's secure comms channel, the ripple began. At Volta Capital's Zurich office, a midnight shift operations director received a silent alert. At Atlantic Air's legal compliance hub, a blinking red code interrupted a PowerPoint on brand identity and belonging, and inside the cockpit of Flight 447, a green notification slid onto the crew tablet. Compliance check, Clause 7C in review. Executive monitoring active. But none of the passengers noticed. Not the man across from Keanu scrolling through property listings. Not the older woman 2 rows ahead, dabbing her lips with a monogrammed napkin. And certainly not Natalie, who stood near the first-class galley, chatting with another attendant about dinner service, and who might be flying in 1A next week. The curtain rustled again. Then, a voice, low, cautious, broke the quiet. "Excuse me, sir?" Keanu looked up. It was Evan, the junior flight attendant. Barely 25, nervous eyes, uniform a touch too crisp. He held a tablet in one hand, and anxious curiosity in the other. I just wanted to confirm. You're Mr. K. Charles? Keanu didn't smile. He just nodded once. Calm. Measured. Evan swallowed. His eyes darted down to the tablet, then back up. Sir, I think there's been an error. Or not. I mean... Evan, Keanu said gently, you're doing fine. And Evan knew instantly that whatever was happening, this man wasn't just a passenger anymore. He was the reason the plane would land differently than it took off. And Evan wasn't the only one beginning to understand that. Not by a long shot. Somewhere over the mid-Atlantic, Flight 447 kept slicing through the sky as if nothing had changed. But something had, and the cabin, though polished and quiet, had started to feel wrong. In first class, the air was still chilled to perfection. Napkins were folded with corners sharp enough to cut. Champagne flutes clinked like a symphony of success. Yet, underneath it all, there was a shift, a subtle tightening in the air. Like the static before a storm. Martin Langford, still sprawled in seat 1A, reclined deeper into his leather throne, grinning as he sipped from his third glass. He was holding court with no one in particular. You know what I hate about flying commercial? He said aloud, not caring who listened. You pay for silence and you still end up sharing oxygen with the riffraff. No one laughed, but no one stopped him. A few seats behind him, a woman glanced up from her novel, eyes lingering toward the galley. She'd overheard Natalie whispering moments ago. He doesn't look like he belongs here, Natalie had said, and that was before the message came. At that moment, inside the crew area, Natalie stared at her tablet. A red banner blinked urgently across the screen. Compliance alert. Executive oversight initiated. Do not interfere. Beside her, Bryce, the onboard flight manager, tried to hide the sweat forming at his collar. He tapped at his earpiece, lips tight. No, I don't know who K. Charles is, he hissed under his breath, but Zurich Legal just flagged him as a confirmed stakeholder. That's impossible. He's in 17C. Natalie's breath caught. He's... What? 1,000 feet away, in the back half of the plane, Keanu sat calmly in 17C, flipping the page of the in-flight magazine. Not reading, just waiting. The child across the aisle watched him, eyes wide. From a few rows back, a college student named Maya Lin had been live tweeting since boarding. She didn't know the man's name at first, but when she zoomed in on his face during a quick video, she froze. Wait, is that Keanu Reeves? Her video captioned, "They kicked Keanu out of first class and gave his seat to some finance bro, lol, what?" was already at 340,000 views. Then 700, 0, then 1.1 million. By the time the clip hit TikTok with the tag Flight 447, people weren't laughing, they were watching and seething. Inside the aircraft, whispers spread like turbulence. Some were confused, some amused. A few were deeply, deeply uncomfortable. In the galley, Evan, the junior attendant, was trembling. He had overheard Natalie earlier saying, "The man in 1A requested no one sit beside him. I mean, look at that guy." He hadn't said anything. But now, with the truth blooming across media feeds and red alerts spreading through the airline's private channels, Evan understood. They hadn't just insulted a customer, they had displaced their future. Back in seat 17C, Keanu closed the magazine, set it aside, and stared ahead. He wasn't waiting for an apology. He was waiting for the fallout. At precisely 3:17 p.m. Zurich time, every screen inside Atlantic Air's European Operations Center blinked at once. A red bar stretched across the top of the master terminal. Clause 7C activated, live oversight engaged, ownership verification confirmed. The director of operations, halfway through a latte and a meeting about holiday promotions, dropped both, She grabbed her phone and dialed legal. Who the hell is Kate Charles, and why is the system saying he holds a controlling interest? Silence on the other end. Then, he's real. Zurich just cleared it. That's Keanu Reeves. Back aboard Flight 447, the news hadn't reached most of the passengers yet, but in the first-class galley, Natalie's hands were trembling as she scrolled through a secure crew feed. The photo was unmistakable. Keanu Reeves, owner, private stake via Valta Capital. Silent acquisition finalized, 48%, controlling equity. Her tablet slipped slightly in her grip. Meanwhile, Martin Langford continued his descent into self-congratulatory nonsense, oblivious to the storm forming just outside his bubble of entitlement. "I swear," he said to the woman seated beside him, "we keep lowering standards like this and soon first class will feel like a charity bus. Honestly, it's not even about race, it's about class. Some people just don't understand how to behave at this level." The woman said nothing, just reached slowly for her wine and took a sip that trembled at the rim. Back in business class, the buzz had already begun. Phones, once on silent, now glowed with text alerts and whispers. "Is that really him? He's the owner? Wait, what is Clause 7C? One man muttered, "He's the reason the stock's tanking right now." Because across the Atlantic, in New York, Valta Capital's trading algorithm had begun executing its orders. First, a quiet dump of Atlantic Air shares. Volume high, timing precise. Within 90 seconds, the stock had dropped 12%. By the third minute, 27%. Bloomberg ran a banner, breaking Atlantic Air in freefall amid executive ownership conflict. In flight, the energy had shifted again. Evan, the junior attendant, passed by Keanu's row for the third time, each step slower than the last. His eyes flicked toward the man who now sat calmly, quietly, the epicenter of a financial earthquake. Keanu gave no command, made no scene. He merely tapped his phone once more. Another code sent, another clause engaged. This wasn't revenge. It was removal. Correction, the curtain to first class parted suddenly. Bryce, now pale and sweating, emerged and made his way toward 17C, crouching like a man delivering bad news to a judge. "Mr. Charles," he said, voice tight, "we've had some developments. Zurich has reached out. There's been a misunderstanding, and we'd like to make it right." Keanu didn't move. He didn't blink. He just said, "It's not a misunderstanding, Bryce." He stood slowly, collecting his coat, the cabin watching in stunned silence. Then he walked forward, not back to his seat, back to his throne. The walk from row 17 to the front of the plane wasn't long, but in that moment it felt like the aisle had split the cabin in half. One side watched in awe, the other in denial. Keanu's steps were measured, not rushed, not vengeful, just deliberate. Every eye followed him now. Passengers who had ignored him, whispered about him, scoffed at his clothes, were suddenly very aware of the man they had misjudged. Their silence became a new kind of noise, a chorus of held breaths and shifting guilt. As he reached the threshold of first class, the golden lighting no longer felt warm. It felt exposed. Bryce, standing awkwardly to the side, tried to usher him in with a forced smile. "Mr. Charles, your original seat has been prepared. On behalf of the crew, I'd like to extend..." But Keanu brushed past him without acknowledging the gesture. Martin Langford, still sprawled in 1A, looked up at the figure now standing before him. His smirk faltered. "You again?" he scoffed. "Weren't you escorted out?" Keanu didn't answer right away. He let the moment stretch, let the discomfort settle. Then, his voice, calm as still water, "You've mistaken quiet for weakness." Martin shifted in his seat. "Look, I don't know what kind of PR stunt this is, but Keanu raised a hand. not to silence him, but to end the conversation entirely. "You don't need to know who I am," he said. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a slim black card, platinum-edged, without a name, but bearing the unmistakable crest of Volta Capital. He held it up between two fingers, just long enough for Bryce, Natalie, and the rest of first class to see it, then tucked it away. Martin's lips parted, searching for something clever to say, but all he found was air. Keanu turned to Natalie. "You moved me without checking my name. You made assumptions based on appearance, not identity." Natalie's face flushed, her voice cracking. I was just following procedure." "No," Keanu cut in, still quiet. "You were following prejudice packaged as protocol." Then, to Bryce, Atlantic Air just violated its operational ethics agreement. Clause 7C is in effect. Volta Capital is triggering full withdrawal. Integration with Mad Air is suspended, and investor notifications are underway. Bryce's knees buckled slightly. You're serious?" Keanu stepped toward his seat, 1A, and placed a hand gently on the headrest. "I gave this company a chance to show its culture, not its marketing. You failed. Spectacularly." He sat down. A silence fell across the cabin, heavier than before. One row back, an older man muttered to his wife. They had no idea who he was. The woman whispered back, they didn't care who he was. Until they had to. Keanu reclined slightly, adjusted his seatbelt, and closed his eyes. He wasn't reclaiming a chair. He was reclaiming control. And the world was about to watch it all burn, starting from seat 1A. The fallout didn't wait for landing. Within minutes of Keanu reclaiming seat 1A, the ripple effects had already erupted into a global storm. Screens in airport lounges across Europe and the US flickered from sports highlights to breaking news headlines. Social media feeds exploded in real time. Flight 447, Keanu owns Atlantic seat 1A. Justice, CNN's ticker read, Volta Capital pulls $500, 0 cents, M from Atlantic Air after owner was ejected mid-flight. But inside the aircraft, the consequences took on a different texture. Quieter, colder, personal. Bryce stood pale near the galley, barely keeping upright as his crew tablet updated every 30 seconds with new alerts. Internal investigation initiated. Leadership under review. Executive misconduct reports pending. He was already receiving messages from corporate legal, none of them reassuring. Natalie, once the picture of control, now sat alone on the jump seat behind the galley curtain. Her hands were clenched, face frozen. Her name had begun circulating online, trending under a viral thread titled, "The Flight Attendant Who Judged Keanu Reeves." She didn't look at anyone. She didn't speak. She simply stared at her screen, watching herself become a symbol of everything wrong with privilege in uniform. As for Martin Langford, his power had evaporated. The champagne he once swirled like a scepter now sat untouched on the armrest. He stared blankly ahead, jaw tight, the color draining from his face. He was no longer the most important man in the cabin. He wasn't even relevant. "There's got to be some misunderstanding," he mumbled to no one in particular. But even he didn't believe it. Keanu, meanwhile, didn't gloat. He didn't smirk. He opened his notebook, scribbled one final line, and closed it slowly. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about spectacle. It was about correction. From the back of the plane, Evanazio, the junior flight attendant, watched it all unfold, frozen at the edge of duty and moral clarity. For hours he had said nothing, but now something inside him stirred. He stepped cautiously toward Keanu's seat. "Sir," he said quietly, "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry." Keanu looked up, Not with anger, but with an honesty that made Evan shift in his shoes. "You weren't the problem," Keanu said softly. "But now you know. So decide who you'll be next time." Evan nodded, the weight of that truth settling on his shoulders like armor. At the front of the cabin, the cockpit door opened and Captain Harris stepped out. The pilot was composed, but his face carried the tension of a man briefed mid-air by corporate HQ. He approached Keanu and spoke with formal deference. "Mr. Reeves," he said, "we've just been informed of your position. I want to extend a personal and professional apology on behalf of the flight crew." Keanu offered a nod, no smile, just the gravity of someone who had earned that apology the hard way. "Apologies are a start," he said, "but culture is what happens when no one's watching. Fix that." And then he turned back toward the window, leaving them with silence more powerful than any speech. Flight 447 descended smoothly through the cloud cover over Zurich, its cabin lights dimmed in that soft, deliberate way luxury airlines use to suggest calm, even when everything beneath the surface is cracking. But the calm was a lie. By the time the landing gear touched down, Atlantic Air's top brass was already scrambling. In boardrooms from Manhattan to London, conference lines buzzed, legal teams churned, and executive assistants whispered the same line over and over: "He owns us." Inside the plane, no one applauded the landing. No hollow claps, no forced smiles. The tension hadn't dissipated. It had hardened. Those who once sat tall now folded inward, unsure where to look. Martin Langford sat with arms crossed, eyes hollow, reputation unraveling in real time. His portfolio was tanking. Investors were pulling out, club memberships suspended. An audit of his entire career loomed. He hadn't just insulted a man, he had insulted his boss. In the galley, Natalie remained seated on the jump seat, numb. Her name had gone viral, yes, but not in the way she had ever imagined. She didn't speak when two men in dark suits boarded with airport security, flashing internal affairs credentials. "Ms. Green," one said flatly, "you'll need to remain on board for debrief." She nodded. No protest, no defense. She knew. It wasn't just one mistake, it was a pattern. And now it had a face. Beside her, Bryce received the same instruction. His hands trembled as he handed over his crew tablet. In the terminal, 3 more suits waited, this time not for them, but for Martin Langford. "Mr. Langford," one began with professional detachment, "your privileges with Atlantic Air and all partner carriers have been revoked. Your travel accounts are under review. You'll be escorted from the terminal." Martin opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The man who once ruled the air now walked off it, with nothing. Keanu Reeves remained seated in 1A as the rest of the cabin disembarked. No security around him, no entourage, just a man in quiet clothing, back straight, eyes steady. As he exited the plane, he passed Evan, who stood at the galley with tears threatening in his eyes. "Sir," Evan said, voice barely more than breath. "Thank you." Keanu paused, just long enough to leave him with this: "Next time someone's silence feels wrong, say something." Evan nodded. That moment would stay with him longer than any paycheck. Outside, a small, private group waited. Not press, not paparazzi, but internal airline staff. Among them was Lena Caro, Atlantic Air's newly appointed VP of Crisis Management. She extended her hand. "Mr. Reeves, we deeply regret." But Keanu stepped past her with a quiet nod. He didn't need apologies anymore. He had action. 3 days later, a letter appeared online from Evan, a handwritten post titled "The Cost of Silence." In it, he confessed his regret, pledged 6 months of his salary to a fund for airline employees facing discrimination, and ended with, "Silence has a price. I'm paying mine first." Volta matched the donation tenfold. quietly, anonymously. And Keanu? He didn't tweet. He didn't boast. He just worked in silence. Rebuilding a culture. From 17C, Keanu Reeves never raised his voice. He didn't need to. In a world that too often confuses wealth with worth, his silence exposed an entire system. His final message wasn't spoken. It was lived. Power isn't how loudly you speak. It's what you choose to fix when no one's watching. If this story moved you, share it. Drop a comment. What part hit you hardest? Was it the injustice, the twist, or the quiet redemption? And tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Your voice matters more than you know.